Many of you are probably aware of the ongoing story inside of Ohio. As it's raining so furiously, a massive train derailment took place last Friday in the town of East Palestine, Ohio, prompting authorities to order an evacuation 1 mile around it. The chemical vinyl chloride was spilled in the accident. It is highly toxic. The flammable gas is used to make polyvinyl chloride, or PVC, pipes, vehicle interior features such as upholstery, and plastic kitchenware. There were other chemicals there that were being carried, but they have not been identified yet. It was a 150-car train that had crashed from the Norfolk Southern Rail Company in Madison, Illinois, going from Madison, Illinois to Conway, Pennsylvania. It derailed near East Palestine's James Street crossing. The cause is yet unknown, but is highly suspected to be the braking system. According to a report by the Environmental Protection Agency, acute short-term exposure to high levels of vinyl chloride in the air has resulted in central nervous system effects such as dizziness, drowsiness, headaches in humans. Chronic long-term exposure to vinyl chloride through inhalation and oral exposure in humans has resulted in liver damage. Now, despite this, very serious effects of ingesting this, breathing it in, whatever it is that you happen to end up doing, the authorities say that it's safe to move back in. So, anytime you're ready, you can just jump on board and go back to your house in this very suspicious state. Well, the thing is, people in the area are now reporting that they're finding dead fish in rivers. Now, of course, these chemicals will get into the river because they were spilled. They got into the Ohio River, which is going to contaminate parts of West Virginia as well. Now, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources says 3,500 small fish across a 7.5 miles of stream on Wednesday have been found dead. So it's very clearly already there in the water. And that's going to be a major problem, as you know, water's kind of like the essential thing for life to exist. So, naturally, a lawsuit has been filed, and it was filed very quickly. The following Tuesday was filed by 2 Pennsylvania residents who are calling for Norfolk Southern to pay for all associated health costs as a result of this disaster. And they're asking that it be given to anyone related to this disaster who lived within a 30-mile radius. That kind of seems like the very least they could do for the people that they essentially just kind of killed. Well, the big question is, so what happened? What exactly caused this? Now, the investigators who have already been to the scene say that the derailment happened because of a broken axle. That's the axle, the bar between the wheels broke. And they say that there is security footage from a station about 20 miles back that showed the undercarriage was throwing up sparks and it was on fire. And this raises serious questions about why the crew wasn't aware of this malfunction taking place. How do you not notice a fire and a bunch of sparks? Well, it may be because thousands of workers were just laid off, so there probably wasn't anybody close enough to notice. Documents showed that when the current transportation safety rules were first created, a federal agency sided with the industry lobbyists and limited regulations governing the transport of hazardous compounds. The decision effectively exempted many trains from hauling dangerous materials, including the one in Ohio, from the high hazard classification and its more stringent safety requirements. Amid the lobbying blitz against stronger transportation safety regulations, Norfolk Southern paid executives millions and spent billions on stock buybacks, while the company shed thousands of employees despite warnings that understaffing is intensifying safety risks. Norfolk Southern officials also fought off a shareholder initiative that could have required company executives to assess, review, and mitigate risks of hazardous materials transportation. Now, of course, there have been recent attempts to try to update safety regulations, despite the fact that they're trying to get rid of about as many people as possible, leaving the smallest possible skeleton crew to man these trains. An attempt was made in 2017 under then U.S. President Donald Trump, and about $6 million in lobbying funds was spent by railway lobbyists to Republican politicians to make sure that didn't pass. One of the things that they were aiming at was preventing new regulation from coming in to deal with the braking system. Now, the regulators specifically killed provisions requiring rail cars to have that carry hazardous materials, flammable materials, the kind of stuff that explodes and kills people, be equipped with an electronic braking system that stops trains more quickly than you would with the conventional air brakes that are used. The Hazardous Materials Safety Administration proposed refitting the brakes on all trains that carry these hazardous materials. Now, the American Association of Railroads, which is the lobbying group, decided that that was too disruptive and costly. It'd be just a little bit too much of a hassle, and it would be too much expensive to not kill people. Let's get that one down. Now, another problem has been the recent decision by U.S. President Joe Biden to crush a workers' strike across the railroad industry. Now, as you recall, this went on for some time, and one of the main things that they were asking for was increased safety regulation, which probably could have prevented this entire situation. So instead of being concerned with public safety, he did what any capitalist leader would do. Whatever big business wanted him to do, and crush the strike. Because that's a part of building back better. The industry had fervently resisted safety standards and instead laid off staff and increased the length of the trains. Norfolk Southern was the worst offender in 2021, the average train length being over 7,000 feet, which is 1.3 miles or more than 100 rail cars. The Norfolk Southern train that derailed in Ohio was 9,300 feet long, or nearly 1.8 miles. Now, there's actually much more. There's actually records of shareholder meetings where they said, hey, things aren't safe, we need to do something about it, we need to update the safety regulation, and them essentially voting not to, saying that it was too expensive. Now, here's a little something about brakes on trains. The regulations in the United States for brakes on trains hasn't been updated since 1868. The Civil War was the last time someone thought they should upgrade the standards on brakes for trains. Think about that. Now, you can imagine that trains are probably moving a lot faster now than they were in the Civil War. So you'd think that with increased speed would come increased safety regulation. I mean, it's one of those common sense things, but for some reason this just doesn't exist with the profit motive. But one thing I really do like is how much of an FU to the public this has been. They literally, in their own meetings, acknowledge this is dangerous, but man, we're not going to do anything about it. Their own workers raised the red flag about this being a problem. They were ignored and crushed by the federal government. All of this going on. And this is after another Norfolk Southern train derailed, this time outside of Detroit. It wasn't the disaster that the Ohio one was, but it is another derailing, and investigations are not done yet, but it looks like it's going to be possibly for the same reason. The railroad industry couldn't have given you any more of a middle finger without doing it literally. They explicitly refused to put in necessary safety precautions, even being warned that they were needed, not just by their own people, their own employees, and federal regulation telling them that it was necessary. They refused to do it to save some cash. And one of the things that they mentioned was that it would cost them about 2 weeks' revenue to make the change. I wonder if it's going to cost less than 2 weeks' revenue to pay for all the damage that they've done and to pay for all the lawyers that they're going to have to put out probably for the next 10 years in trying to deal with this situation. Yeah, very probably it won't. It's more cost effective to just let people die than to update safety regulations. I mean, that's what we're doing here, right? Via profit motive, where somehow the nastiest of men with the nastiest of motivations will somehow make everything good, in that unrestrained psychotic self-interest will somehow make things better for everyone else and will do what's best and create the most happiness. I mean, you got to be pretty goddamn delusional if you still believe that at this point. Especially with this. Them literally saying right to your face, to hell with you. I mean, you couldn't have any more of an example of why the market doesn't work. Of why the market is a murderous entity. And anyone who can still defend that, especially that free market fundamentalist nonsense, well, then people just won't choose to go there. Well, I guess they won't use a railroad if they're fucking dead. And I suppose if you just happen to be a capitalist just like Norfolk Southern, you literally don't care that people are dying anyway. So literally nothing would be done. I mean, this is common sense. I shouldn't have to tell you any of this. And you, the vast majority of my audience, don't need to be told that. This is one of the biggest FUs that capitalism has ever given. And before I wrap up this video, I just want to deal with one piece of BS in this situation. So, they're running around comparing this to Chernobyl. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to reject that. Chernobyl did not happen for the same reason that this did. Chernobyl was a legitimate accident while testing safety systems. This was completely predictable and was predicted to happen and was allowed to happen anyway in order to save costs. This is not quite the same thing. Now, there are fair criticisms you can make of the Chernobyl disaster. And there's also other comparisons you could make, like how they rebuilt an entire town for everybody who had to be moved. They gave specialized health care to every person who was affected for the rest of their lives. And they still got people out incredibly fast for this actual disaster. They even were a bit slow on it. And they still did astronomically better than capitalism would have done. In fact, we see the mainstream media right now essentially trying to cover this up. I'm not alleging some kind of conspiracy that the stupid balloons became news to distract us from this. I'm saying the media is deliberately choosing, the mainstream media, the very high end, the MSNBC, the CNN, Fox News, they are all deliberately choosing not to cover this. No one forced them to do it. There isn't there's these great bigger stories that they could talk about, and even then they still have a 24 hours of news day to fill, which could easily be filled with this. At the very worst, even if you believed in the mainstream media, this would be nothing but negligence by not reporting it. But I think it's a lot worse than that. They are deliberately, for the sake of Norfolk Southern, who, you know what, I think we might want to start taking a look into who's invested into it and finding out exactly why this major piece of news, this very major thing that happened, isn't being covered. And you can't just say, oh, well, the liberal media is not covering it, because you could juxtapose this to Biden and his smashing of the railroad strike, because Fox News isn't covering it either. This has gotten nothing more than 15-second sound bites. It's being covered very extensively by independent media. Local level media is covering it, but the big national ones that everybody sees have just decided this just isn't happening. I'm sure they would rather you pay attention to something else, like Russia. I mean, that's important. I would certainly agree that it is. But there's a lot more relevant things to the average American person at this time, like this disaster. And while it's good to pay attention to what your country is doing overseas, it's also really important to call them out when they make such tremendous blunders, psychotic, cold-blooded blunders at home that kill you and your family. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.